Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia? You have said that you're willing to accelerate the protocols for street kids. I'm alarmed that poor kids with no parents who are homeless and distraught, you would just go through this and allow that to happen to a minor.
You just heard an exchange during the confirmation hearing of Levine with Senator Rand Paul, who was asking a very straightforward question about whether or not, essentially, Levine was going to push this radical transgender policy over the wishes of parents, usurping the role of parents. Joining me now to talk more about this, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Senator, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
Well, first, I want to commend you for asking, I think, a very important question, asking it very directly. And of course, the outcome was predictable. Levine avoided answering your question, repeating like a robot the same answer over and over. But also predictable was the press, saying that you engaged in this transphobia when you were simply asking a very straightforward policy question. Did you ever get an answer post-hearing?
No answer whatsoever. And what's amazing about being labeled as a hater is I never even mentioned Levine or the surgery and things that she's done to herself. I never mentioned that at all. I just asked whether a minor, whether a 10-year-old could override their parental consent. So your parents say, you're 10 years old and you're not going to do this. And then the 10-year-old says, no, I am. And then the government would adjudicate that as the minor having the right to overrule their parents. I think that's horrendous to imagine that. People also need to realize what's going on in these clinics. 10% of the kids are between the ages of 3 and 10. And when they go in, see, these people have changed the language. It's Orwellian. They say they're affirming the child's identity. What they do is, if the child is confused and says this, 4 or 5 people will come up to them and say, oh, we love you, and, you're so strong and you're so brave, and it's a great decision. But no one's telling them the opposite. The people who work in these clinics are often people who've undergone these surgeries or done these things to themselves. It's one opinion that they're hearing, and then their parents would be overruled. I just can't imagine anybody, and I think there's actually more people in our country, mainstream people, who actually, some of them vote independent and Democrat, that would be horrified to think that a 10-year-old would be sort of goaded into these and groomed into these decisions. I don't know. I think her Levine's answer is so far out the mainstream that I want people to hear about it, but instead they label me a hater, so to try to not have anybody pay attention to the real argument.
So, Senator Paul, you're also a doctor. So let me ask you a medical question. In what other category do we allow young people, and I'm going to take 10 years old, to make medical decisions, life-altering decisions, without input from their parents?
Almost zero, but I would say that the one area where they've pushed this, and where we've had this debate before, is with minors and abortion.
Right.
That they want the minor to be able to make a decision, their parents not to know that they're having this horrific thing done, a 15, 16-year-old girl. But not only that, for the child is it a horrific thing, but also it's a major surgery that the 15-year-old's undergoing without their parental consent. In that area, they've been in it. But in traditional medicine, I worked as an ER doctor for several years. If your child came in and had a cut on their finger and you weren't with them and a neighbor brought them in, we would say, well, we're going to clean it up and we're going to wait till mom and dad get here. We wouldn't do anything. Even the minor scratch or bruises, we would never do it because they need the advocate. They need their parent there to be there. And see, medicine's kind of funny. You might have fallen off your bike and have a bruise on your stomach, and the kid could say they're really sore, but it could be a ruptured spleen and they could die, and you have to do life-threatening surgery. But almost unless something's acute, you're always asking the parents. The parents are always involved with it, even if it's by phone if they can't get there for an emergency. But that's all turned on its head because these people aren't talking about science or medicine. They're talking about a political extremist philosophy that they want to push on kids and push on society. But it's really not medicine as per se.
So it's the political carve-outs for abortion and these transgender procedures that, as you say, have nothing to do with health care but have more to do with advancing an agenda. Now, you also have brought up the issue of sports, of women's sports, and what this whole agenda would do to women's sports.
Yeah, this one really rubs me wrong, and also my wife as well. She wrote something recently that was published about the two boys that are running in the girls' track meet. So when the guy that Biden has appointed to be head of education was the head of Connecticut, I asked him, because it's like, my goodness, do you think it's really fair to have boys running in the girls' track meet? They win all the medals. They stand about a foot taller, and nobody thinks that's fair. And I actually think that there are people that are going to eventually, leave people. Biden says, oh, he's Main Street Joe, he's middle class Joe, working class values. Well, these aren't working class values. These are bizarre, extreme things that most people, a lot of people who are moderate or even liberal have girls that run track or swimming that don't think it would be fair to have boys in those sports. But it's the extreme agenda of people way, way out on the left is ruling the Democrat Party now.
Yeah, and I will quote you from what you said in committee in response to the Secretary's of Education, the nominee. Bizarre, absolutely bizarre. And thank you, Senator Rand Paul, for joining us today, but also for speaking truth, for not holding back.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Tony.
Absolutely.